I'm Shalina Tobin, aka Posh Nosh Gal. Today I am so excited to be joined by real culinary legends in the form of John Williams, MBE. John has cooked for some of the most famous historical icons of our time, including the Queen, the Prince of Wales, and Margaret Thatcher, to name just a few. His list of accolades would take hours to mention, but include an MBE from Her Majesty the Queen for services to hospitality, a royal warrant, a Lifetime Achievement Tatler Award, and of course, as long-standing executive head chef at the famous Ritz Hotel in London, a coveted Michelin star. John, a warm welcome to you, and thank you so much for giving me your time today.
Thank you for having me.
It's absolutely my pleasure. So, John, let's just get the whole situation, the pandemic, out of the way. Just want to deal with that, and then we'll just talk about you. It's been an incredibly tough year due to the pandemic. Has this been a time of reflection? How have you been? Have you been going into work? Talk to us about how you've been feeling.
I think basically I have been working for more than 45 years. And apart from holidays, I've never had a week out of work. So this has been very, very different for me personally. Obviously, when you work in a kitchen and you enjoy working in a kitchen, it's going to create a very big void in your life. And we were suddenly brought about by Zoom, which I must be honest, I'm not the greatest lover of Zoom meetings and things. Not because of anything. I've had to do quite a few. Yes, we do them with work, but also with other situations, more to do with colleges and things. I've done a lot of Zooms for colleges. And that has been very beneficial in a lot of ways because there's a lot of young people out there that suffer a lot more than myself. And I just feel very privileged to be able to, do a few of them and basically just tell a story so that they can feel enthused. I come from nothing. I'm not saying that I'm anything now, but the reality is I come from nothing and anybody can do what I've done. It's as simple as that. And I think that message is very, very important for the people out there, especially today, with people feeling that they've lost a lot of time. I honestly believe that it will iron itself out. Everybody's worrying about youngsters, but I think there are a lot more. There's a lot more tenacity to young people in growing and taking their experience and moving forward. But onto the situation of Zoom, of the pandemic, sorry. The pandemic, in essence, did worry me. It worried me in the sense, one, I didn't want to get COVID. I live on my own, although I do have my family close at hand. They're not too far away. And, a lot of time was spent by myself and in between any kind of meetings or things. And I did keep very busy. I must be honest, I kept busy with, all kinds of different little projects that I had. You then have to cook for yourself, wash up after yourself. And I've never done that so much in my life, which was something else, it was a new experience. I got into January and I basically, for the last couple of years, I've been quite overweight and always been a big lad anyway, in that sense. And I decided after, several, how can I say, Bupa tests, as it were, where they were saying, yes, your sugar levels are rising. Yes, your blood pressure is rising. And little things like that just are slow to infiltrate my brain. However, I read Tom Watson's book and I suddenly realized here was a man that was much heavier than me. I think he was 3 or 4 stone heavier than me at the start. And he said, I started walking. And that's when I started to get intrigued, because I do work out in the gym a little bit, but that had stopped. And I said, well, if he can do it at that weight, why don't I? And he said, it's the easiest way to lose weight. And of course, I got into reading the book, and he started talking about his diet. It was very much the keto type of diet. And I thought, I can do this. So I think it was about January the 7th, I started walking. I did do walks on the weekend with my daughter, and the dog. She brings the dog to make me walk.
Lovely.
And I thought, well, I'm just going to get up every morning and go for a walk for over an hour. And that's what I did. And I also started dieting and making sure that I only ate after 11 a.m. and finished eating by 7. And I've lost a total of 22 kilo.
Wow. Over the year.
And yeah, since the start of the year.
Wow.
And I've sort of relaxed it somewhat now, but it's something that I'm very happy about. I'm worried about when I get back to work, how I'm going to cope with it, because it wasn't a thing where I suddenly put on weight. It's weight that's come over many years.
Yeah.
And I'm at my lightest. I have to have my wardrobe totally changed.
It's not a bad thing.
And everybody tells me that, but I've got clothes that I like. I hang on to them. But, you know, it's something that I'm very happy about. And I also struggle with the knee. I've had a couple of operations on knees, and I thought it would actually really take care of everything. It has made it better for me. But this was about Tom Watson's story and how he basically took control because he wanted to look after his kids. He wanted to join in their fun. He was a sportive guy. I've always been a very sportive person, although nowadays I only play golf. That's my main thing. And it's something that's very important. And I just felt that as I lost the weight, it encouraged me, because at first I just said, okay, let's just aim to get 10 kilos off. And I thought this was a big stretch. And I suddenly got to 5 kilos. I went, oh, we can do this. So the 10 kilos did come. And it was working at about, I'm going to say, between 1 kilo and 1.5 kilos a week. And each week I weigh myself and go, yeah. And then I actually started to weigh myself daily just to make sure it was coming off. And of course, days it goes up and down, but each week it was coming off. And I sort of got to the 10 kilo stage, and I said, no, we're going to carry on with this. And then suddenly, as I started to get back into work or going out, as it started to relax, people were coming up and saying, what on earth have you done? You know, you're a different man. And it was all down to just basically doing this diet. And hopefully that will be the one thing that I will remember this lockdown for. However, the lockdown in itself, you know, there's been a lot of people who have suffered. And we must never forget that. I think one of the things that people are very good at is looking forward, and I'm sure we will go forward in the long term, but we mustn't forget. And you also have to question why this happened. And that's one of the things I have done. I've questioned why. The one thing I do know, the world needs to look at itself. I believe that there is excesses in too many ways, and people tend to feel, okay, and I thought this myself, they tend to think, you know, modern day science will take care of everything, so we'll not have any problems. And to be honest, at the start of this, I remember thinking, you know, we're in Britain, we're in Ireland, we should not be affected. And this was something that was very clear in my mind. And yet here it came, and I thought, we've made a mess of this, because we should have maybe shut the borders. We maybe should have, you know, just literally taken a better control. And I think we were very slow then. And that sort of upset me in the sense that I thought, well, I trust the government, I trust the scientists in every sense. And if they tell me you must do this, I will do it. And it's very important that, you know, people do try to get on board with that. But I'm not saying everything is totally correct and you don't question it, but I did feel a little bit let down when this happened on an island, especially when you look at places like New Zealand, who took a lot better care. And I'm not here to knock the government. The first thing I will say, I'm also very proud in the fact that right at the beginning, they had the foresight to get the vaccine. And they were very clever at that. And we're looking a little bit better now. The one thing that I do for the first time, and I'm not a cautious person neither, but I'm saying we should still be cautious how we move forward. We don't want this to happen again, and we have to put the controls in to stop that. And I really do believe that, and I prefer to come out of it a little bit slower in how we operate rather than stopping the operation. I want to go forward with that. But it is quite important that people respect one another. They look at how they live. I think that it's very important that we really start thinking about what is good for the planet, because that, I think, is the things that have had a knock-on effect to why we've actually got this virus spread across the world. Mm-hmm. And it's certainly not finished across the world. You know, I don't see that finishing for another year, at least. But hopefully, we will come out of it stronger, better. And I'm sure when you look at the positive side of the way people responded to people in general, you know, there was a lot of fantastic work done by people with charities and what they were doing for people. I was amazed. I thought, well, you know, these people are just fantastic, and hopefully this is the way that we will move forward in being good to one another. I already feel that people are forgetting. So, you know, let's see, but I just do hope that we are a little bit more respectful of one another. That's what I would say.
Yeah. The community support, as you said, I mean, it was phenomenal how people did come together and just support each other and the needy. In terms of yourself, I mean, you are very much a mentor. You believe in mentorship programs. You do a lot of giving back. So it's really wonderful to hear that you've been managing to do all of that while we've been in lockdown. Fair enough, it's over Zoom, but still every little helps. John, let's talk about you. Let's talk about, you know, your career and how you got into cooking. So you developed a passion for cooking at a very young age. Yeah. Talk us through how it all began.
Well, I come from a family of 6 children. Yeah. I think the first thing, I was a very sportive young man. Every sport there was within school, I represented the school. I represented the town playing football in the county. But I loved sport. That was the first thing. And sport kept me, I'm a great believer in sport, in the fact that if you participate in sport, team games or singular, it's a very good way of bringing yourself up. I do believe
mental
that
health.
100%, 100%. Yeah. And I enjoy all aspects of sport. And I always remember that when I was probably 13 and I was playing football on a Sunday morning, and this is the inspirational moment, my mother, I should mention that my father was a fisherman and he was away a lot of the time. He would go to sea, he worked in all kinds of trawling situations. But the most common one was he would work, I think it was 11 days working, and then it would be about 3 days off. And the reality of it was my mum was left to run everything. My mum managed everything. She was a typical Geordie lady, tough with a heart of gold. And, you know, she had to actually look after the kids and make sure they were there. And she was cooking all the time and doing this, that, and the other. But I was the chosen one from my mother to help her. I was the second oldest. But for some reason, you know, John, come on, we're going to the shops. You have to help me and grab everything. And I used to carry the bags. And I always remember one sunny day. I must have been about 10. I'm sure it was around that age. Coming home, it was a real hot day. I lived in South Shields. I was brought up in South Shields. And it doesn't get many hot days. But on this particular day, we had been in at that time, supermarkets were not so big. They were just about to start, and there were nothing on the scale of what they were now. And we had been in the fruit and vegetable shop, and the smells, and it was around June, I think June, maybe late June, early July, specifically, and the smells in the fruit and vegetable shop. But the one that I remember was the strawberries. You have to remember then, they didn't even refrigerate the strawberries. And the strawberries were so much better tasting because refrigeration kills flavor. Mm-hmm. Now, I can only say that now, but in that period, it was just, that's the way it was. And we were walking back with our bags full with the shopping in. And my mum, she says, God, I've got to stop. She says, and I'm so thirsty. And she said, come on, John, give us a couple of those strawberries. And we had a couple of strawberries. This is in the street as we were walking back. And the God's honest truth, that strawberry I can still taste. And it also infiltrated me in a way I will never eat strawberries out of season. I still don't. They have to be, normally speaking, British strawberries. I do eat other countries' strawberries, don't get me wrong, but it's very much a seasonal thing for me.
Yeah.
And that's very specific to that. And I just remember the look on my mum's face when she got this juicy strawberry, and I put one in my mouth and I went, oh, that's something else, Mum. But it was just one of the little things I used to go, as I say, we used to go to the butcher's shop, fruit and veg, etc. There used to be a bakery and what have you, and you'd buy your bread. And we had a very simple lifestyle in every sense of the word. She used to bake. I mean, my mum used to make what you call plate pies. It's very much a northern thing. And when she did plate pies, she would make 4 or 5 different pies. There would be mince and onion. There would be ham and egg. She loved her ham and egg pies. And then it was always fruit pies. Right. And there would be apple and blueberry, or apple and blackberry, whichever she basically got. Because blueberries were not so significant in England in those times. You'd only get them very, very short season. And it was just the most when I used to come from school, you could smell that. And I used to eat. I've always been a big eater. I used to eat probably 2 of the pies.
You and me,
Mum used to let me. I one little story, and I'll get back to the start in a moment, but it just while it's in my head. I went back home, and I think it was probably about 15 years ago. And my mum used to have a plate that she only served me food on. It was one of those roasting joint plates, the oval plates. And she'd give me, you know, she always knew that I was a big eater and piled everything on for Sunday lunch. I had just done the South Shields, the Great North Run. And I was really knackered is the word. And I remember sitting there and she says, well, I've got your Sunday lunch for you. And I tucked into this Sunday lunch on this plate, which was, And, you know, there was probably 4 vegetables on there, 2 potatoes and lamb. Lamb was our favorite. And I'll go back to that one as well in a moment. And I ate everything. I thought, that was something else. I ate a hell of a lot there, more than I had been eating anyway. And as I cleaned the plate, my mum looked at me and she went into the kitchen, came back out. She's, I knew you'd want more. So she brought another plate. I said, Mum, I can't. But that's just to give you the feeling, you know, because we weren't wealthy, we were poor. Mm. But she always had good food. Simple, very simple food. I don't want anybody to think that it was any extravagance whatsoever. There was not. It was simple foods.
And you've mentioned a lot of meat that your mum used to cook, but I would have assumed that there'd be a lot of fish in your diet because your dad was a fisherman.
The fish, this is another interesting, the fish aspect, that would only happen when my dad came home. They used to get what they call the fisherman's fry. And there would be a selection. When they got paid, they always got a bass bag and there would be a selection of fish. And I'll tell you the fish that was in there. The first there would always be cod. There would always be smoked haddock, kippers, and there would never be anything of shellfish because there was always fish. That's what they did, fish. Mm-hmm. And my dad used to bring all of these home. And when he arrived home, he used to always, my dad liked to drink a little bit too much for his own good at times. But when he came home, after he'd been to the pub, he'd have his bass bag with the fish in, because he never forgot that, even if he was drunk. But there was always seagulls following him. But he would arrive, and then within a couple of hours, the neighbours used to come around as well, because my mum used to say, oh, give a little bit of fish to Josie up the road, give a little fish. And of course, they would come and they used to share things.
Yeah.
And that was another thing that I always remember. But one other thing, and I'm going to go back to the real start of the story. We used to have a market on a Saturday morning. I remember one morning going with my dad, and it's my love of langoustine. And people that know me know that is my favorite seafood. And when I was young, my dad, we were never able to get the langoustine tails, because what used to happen to them, they were immediately processed for scampi in those days. They never really hit the market because they were a bit too expensive in the way that they were. But what you used to get was the claws. And I remember my dad saying, do you want to try one? So he brought me the claw in the shell. He said, okay, just crack it in your teeth. And then you suck it like a lolly. And I sucked this. And I said, this is the most beautiful seafood. Now, even today, I make my cooks break the langoustine tail cooked, but people are learning it now, but I make them cook the actual claws, and they have to crack them open and take them out with little tweezers whole, so that we serve them, because it is a much sweeter meat as well.
Right.
So it came from the fact that my dad made me eat them when I was very, very young. Anyway, I'm going to go back to the start.
Okay.
What happened was I was obviously got into this situation where I was my mum's helper, and then the first real time that I started cooking was a Sunday morning. I was playing football out in the backyard, and my mum shouted over the fence, and we were just getting warmed up playing football, really. And she said, John, come here. And off I went, and she says, you're going to have to give me a hand. And she said, I want you to scrape those potatoes. I didn't know then, but my mum used to call them new potatoes. They were jerseys. And I scraped the jerseys, and I still do that. The cooks must only scrape the potatoes, because my mum said, you never peel a jersey because you lose the flavor. And it's true. But old women you see, they remember these things and they made things happen correctly. And I had to scrape these potatoes. And the other thing that I had to make was mint sauce. And we had mint in the back garden. She went out and then she cut a piece of mint. She said, okay, you're going to chop that. And it was very rough. Just chop it away, put a little bit of salt, put a little bit of vinegar and water and a touch of sugar. And she had this cup. It was a broken cup that was specifically used for her to make the mint sauce. And what she used to do was heat it up and then pop the cup in the oven for 5 minutes and then take it out and the mint sauce was ready.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's the way she used to do it. It's very, very
Magic.
specific. And I had to make the mint sauce and I scraped the jerseys. But another love of mine, and this is very, very true, was Jersey Royals. And I had scraped these, and I remember she gave me the 4 biggest ones before lunch after doing them, put the melted butter on top. And she says, here, there's a little treat for you before your lunch. Oh. And I ate the 4 jerseys. And those jerseys are one of my favorite ingredients on earth. I really do adore them. If you want taste in a potato, it's Jersey Royal. Mm-hmm. And to this day, if you go into the Ritz kitchen, I promise you, the first thing that you're told when it's in season, whatever you do, when you make the jerseys, put them away, hide them, because if chef finds them, he'll eat them all. They physically change the hiding spot every time. And I go past the new guy and I say, where's the jerseys? And if he doesn't tell me where they are, I say, have we been talking to you? But I adore them.
It's quite funny that you say that because, well, when you were helping your mum, effectively that was like giving you Jersey Royals was like payment and hopefully the Ritz are actually paying you in cash now, so you don't need the Jersey Royals.
No, it's true, but it is such a significant moment. There's 2 things, and they're on the menu in the Ritz, and they have a story, and there's a reason why they are done the way that they're done. They're not done with a great culinary experience in mind, but it's the best way. Mm. And both those stories, whether it was the Longestine or the Jersey Royals, it was because of what you did as a kid.
Right.
And what you had as a kid. And that's how important food is in how you will develop your palate as well. Yeah. I think it is anyway.
And is there anything that your mum used to make that you've actually recreated in your kitchens now in terms of maybe pies? I don't know.
Well, at this particular moment, the dishes that we have on, but over the period of time, my mum used to make dumplings. There's one, this was a long time ago, but this dish actually made it onto a menu in Claridge's. And she used to call them puddings in the corner, but with a Geordie accent, it's puddings in the corner. And basically that was dumplings. They were suet dumplings, which my mum loved. And what she used to do was make a tray of mince. It would be minced beef. And it was very simply onions, carrots with a good gravy, braised. And then she used to put these dumplings on top so that they became crisp on the outside and the gravy soaked into the base.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
It was sitting on top. So I had a dish that we did, and it was a Jarret de Veau. Now, a Jarret de Veau is a shin of veal, and it's quite an exceptional piece. And you have the bone marrow coming out, and this is braised. And I thought, well, I'm going to braise this Jarret de Veau. It was a specialty dish on a Tuesday, I believe. And what I used to do, as I braised them, I used to make the dumplings in there. And I used to put mum's dumplings.
Oh, lovely.
So there are things that have sort of developed themselves into dishes that would be fit for the places that I've worked.
And did you ever make the dumplings for her? Did she ever have your version of it?
No, she didn't. No, she never actually tasted that, to be honest. But I did tell her. And she just laughed. My mum didn't, she was very much a Northeastern lady, and she only came to London 3 or 4 times when she was alive. And I remember taking her into Claridge's. This is the God honest truth. And she sat down, and I said, "Just order, Mum, see what you want." She was with my dad. And I said, "Just order what you want." She looked at the menu, and she said, "No, I don't fancy anything." I said, "What for?" "No, no." And I knew what it was. She says, this was about 15, 20 minutes later. She says, "Have you seen the price of that breast of chicken?" I said, "Yeah, Mum." She says, "I can get me my week's ingredients in for that much." I said,
Oh, bless her.
she was embarrassed to pay that kind of money. She wasn't paying for it. But it was just, she couldn't, comprehend. It wasn't that she didn't want to eat it,
Yeah.
but it was that fear. And that's so true. So I'm going to go back to that particular day when we did the jerseys. And I used to do little bits and pieces for her. And there was a man called Graham Kerr. Graham Kerr was the Galloping Gourmet and probably one of the very first TV celebrity chefs. And one of the things Graham Kerr used to do, he used to travel the world in the greatest kitchens of restaurants or hotels and all of the great chefs of France. And he would go to somewhere like Paul Bocuse, have a duck dish, for example. I particularly remember a duck dish. And he would eat this and he'd get very excited, and he would always go back to the studio, try to recreate, which he made, generally speaking, in comparison, a bit of a, dog's ear of the thing that he was supposed to be producing. But he did his very, very best, and it was a bit tongue-in-cheek and fun and etc. But what he used to do when he prepared that meal, he used to have this very long table. He would set the table for 3. He would put the 3 plates down. He would have the most magnificent wine. He would run out to the audience and hand-pick the 2 most beautiful ladies. He would put one either side of him. He would look at them, and then he would put a mouthful of the dish and get so excited, and then he would take a glass of wine and tell you what it was he was drinking in vintage. And he used to look at the ladies again as though to say, "I'm king." And really, really enjoy. And I said, I want some of that. Especially being able to dine with 2 beautiful ladies on either side and have this wine and food. And I'm still looking for that today. But it was a memorable moment.
Well, the Galloping Gourmet that was an incredibly successful period for him. And that was on for 2 years, and he became a worldwide sensation, and even had an Emmy Award nomination, I think.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Did you ever, and I believe he was an inspiration for you. Did you ever get to meet him?
No, I've never met him. No. I know he went through a tough time, and he's gone to the church and things now.
Yeah, moved into
I don't know if he's still around even, but he was, I did find it. I thought there's something in it. I don't know if it's the hospitality aspect, because that was definitely there. But it was the fact, the enjoyment of food and the celebration of enjoyment of food that really struck a chord with me. And I was very young then. I'm going to say 13. And of course, what happened for me was another significant moment. As I said, I was very, very sportive. And I remember going to the careers, the teacher that was in charge of careers. And we were sitting down. And, "Right, John, what do you think you want to do?" I says, "Well, I like cooking." And we had a little chat, and the lady said to me, she says, "You know what? There is something that is just happening this year as a trial." And I said, "What's that?" She said, "Well, there's a course in South Shields Marine and Technical College, which was just 5 minutes down the road from my school, where there is a professional chef who is going to actually teach you how to cook. And you get this certificate at the end. And, you know, you can do it for a year. And I said, oh, okay, that sounds very interesting. I want to do that. Now, you have to remember, at that time, I had done some domestic science at school as well, but very little. And I said, no, I like doing this. And they said, okay, well, it seems like you can do that. If they've got enough people on there, you'll be able to do it. What I didn't realize, as I said it, other people got to hear about it. And there was 5 other people from my school, all guys, who said, we want to do that.
Brilliant.
And there was 6 of us went. I think there was about 10 in the class in total, but 6 from my school went. And the very first time that I arrived in the kitchen, the first meal that we made, or dish, should I say, was spaghetti bolognese, which in those days was, you know.
Very fancy.
And yeah, and I set out to work, etc. And halfway through the cooking aspect, the chef came up to me. Now, he's also another important person because I've been in touch with him right up until about 5 years ago. He's a man called Arthur Robertson, and he was teaching, and he had London experience. And he came up to me and said, okay, young man, I think you're enjoying this, aren't you? I said, enjoy it? I love it. I was physically excited. This creating, I'm quite a boisterous person, but when I cook, I totally go into myself. And I think that's just a natural thing. I was making this and he said, no, I can see that you really, really enjoy it. And I remember him saying at the end, he pointed me out and said, look what this lad's done for this bolognese sauce. Taste it. And I thought, wow. And that was the start, really, of where I wanted to be. And I did that 1 day a week, a full day, and I dropped, I think it was 3 subjects from school to be able to do that for my GCSEs. Right. So I only got 5 GCSEs. But it was a chosen, and I got the certificate for the cooking. And I said, okay, I came to 16. I wasn't even 16, I was about 15 and a half, and I thought, I'm going to get ahead of the game. I applied for an apprenticeship in a local brewery in the Northeast called Vaux Breweries, and they had lots of hotels and pubs at that time. And there was a country house hotel. It's basically on the road to Jedburgh from Newcastle. And it's about 40 miles away from where I lived. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, I don't care. It looks nice to me. And I went for the interview. The general manager was a Scottish person. He's a great guy. And he interviewed me and he says, you've got the job. And I started working there on I think it was the day after my 16th birthday. And I got paid £9 per week. And for £9 a week, I used to do 5 split shifts and plus 2 breakfasts added on. I lived in the premises and I used to go to college on my day off. So I was working 6 days as well. And the interesting thing is, for that £9, I was under the tax threshold and I didn't even get taxed. Mm. So it tells you how small the wage was.
Yeah,
but,
absolutely.
You know, it was a great experience.
Yeah.
And at some point, I've got to mention that I went back 40 years later. It was a great experience because the very first job I did was plucking grouse. Never forget it. Because it was in the countryside, there had been a shoot and they said, okay, lad, very first day, very hot August day. And I can still remember, they said, right, oh lad, do you know how to pluck these grouse? I said, grouse? I don't know what grouse is, you know. And they said, we'll take you out in the courtyard, started plucking the grouse, and the smell for someone young who had not experienced the smell and gutting the grouse, I was reaching.
Right.
Now, it was something that was very special to me. Grouse is another ingredient that is probably one of my very favorite meats, not just game. It is such a divine flavor when it's good. And at that time, I thought, what the hell is this? I just don't know. It was horrid. But 40 years later, I had a wonderful PA, Katie Peckham Cooper, her name is now, and she was getting married. And she originated, well, she was Scottish, but she lives in Northumberland, and she was literally 3 miles. Her family have a farm 3 miles away from the Percy Arms. And she says, you're coming to my wedding. I said, I don't do weddings. And she says, you haven't got a choice. And she's a fantastic lady, you know. And she says, no, you're coming and you're going to go to the Percy Arms as well, because you need to go back and have a look. And I decided to go back. Unfortunately, 2 weeks before I actually went back there, I got a message from her mum. And she says, John, you'll never guess what's happened. The Percy Arms has just gone into liquidation. It's closed.
Oh, dear.
And I went around there. I still went. And I drove there. It was fairly early in the morning. I don't know if it was 9 o'clock or something like that in the morning, because I was going to the church for the wedding later on. So the idea was just to quickly go and have a look around. And I walked. First of all, the building looked exactly the same. I couldn't go inside, but I was peering inside. And I thought, this is exactly the way it was. So I went round the back to the kitchen. Now you can imagine my first thoughts. And I turned the exact spot where I was plucking those grouse.
Wow.
I actually got the aroma in my nose.
Oh, how
I immediately just looked into the kitchen, which looked very similar. It wasn't the same, but it was in the same layout. And I started crying. And the smell of the grouse and everything. And I thought, wow, it's just something else, how these things come back to you. I think it was the build-up, because Kate was really pushing me and saying, you've got to go back. You mustn't not go back. And I distinctly remember going to the hotel across the road, and they gave me a lovely show round where my first date was. I went out with the general manager's au pair girl, and she was a French lady who was a lovely, lovely lady. And she said to me, you're going to take my au pair out. She said, I know you're friendly. You're going to go out for dinner tonight. Now, this was a lad that was on £9 a week. So I was scared out of my wits that this bill was going to be more money than I had. And I'll never, this is another little moment. And we went into this wood paneled room after dinner, because it was still done like that, for coffee. And they said, would you like a coffee? And I thought, I've got to be posh here. I said, yes, I'll have an Irish coffee, please. And I remember them putting a little bit of brandy inside the coffee and everything. And it was just something else. And when I went into the room was exactly the same as when I told this young lady. She said, so what do you do? I said, well, I'm a chef. She said, where are you, chef? I said, I'm the chef of the Ritz.
Oh, wow. You said all the way back then.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
So it was, you know, it was very, very
was
special.
that just, you were just impressing her, or was that an actual ambition? Like you really wanted to work at the Ritz at that time?
Oh, no, it was just an ambition.
You're impressing the girl, the au pair.
Yeah. But those little moments are so important in how you feel and the feelings that you get. And I know it takes a long time for those things to perpetrate and become real. But it makes it very, very special and clear about your journey.
Yeah.
That's my humble thinking of it. It is very important, but I was so chuffed at the way that they responded. But, you know, it was my first job, and there were so many little memories that suddenly came back
Yeah.
about the whole experience there.
Yeah.
And I worked there. I didn't work there. I didn't finish my apprenticeship there because in my head, I said to myself, the one thing that I must say, and this was the inspiration of that, the general manager's wife was a French lady. She used to travel back to Paris, and her family were also in hospitality. In actual fact, her father was on the board of Le Doyen restaurant, which is still a 3-star restaurant in Paris. And she used to bring all kinds of ingredients. Now, ingredients, once again, we're still in the northeast of England, and things like foie gras was just off the menu. You would never really get things like that. But she would bring all kinds of different ingredients from France. I remember confit of duck. She would bring different pickles and things and different spice, and she'd always bring them to me. And she'd say, you know, this is the world that you're coming into. Why don't you try doing that? And I would cook something, and she'd say, you cook it for me, John. And I was only a 16-year-old lad, but I was also very pushy. I always had in my head how I was going to operate. And one fun story, I had been working there for no more than 6 months. And it was only a small brigade. There was only 5 people, only 5 chefs for the whole building. This is still the Patience. And we had another lad who was probably 19. I was only 16 at the time. They had another chap that was in the middle, and the sous chef and the head chef. The young chap was on holiday, the number 3, if you like. The number 2 was away on his day off in London, and the head chef went sick. And I remember the general manager coming in to the kitchen, and he said, we have a major problem. And I said, what's that? This is a 16 and a half year old young man. So I can tell you I had some confidence. And he said, well, the chef's gone sick, and the sous chef is in London. The other chap is away on holiday. That leaves you and the commie. And I said, yeah, what's the problem? And he says, well, how are we going to get open tonight? I said, we just cook the food. He said, can you do that? I said, well, I've been helping them do it for 6 months gone. And I said, but I want to do something. This is the God and the truth. I said, I want to do something else. And he said, what do you want to do? And I said, look, I've got this book here. And it was a book that sat in the office. It was called Le Père. I've still got a copy myself. Now, in 1978, that cost me £32. That was more than a week's wage.
Wow.
That particular book. I've still got it now.
Yeah.
And it had beautiful pictures, only French cuisine. And I've always been a lover of French cuisine in every sense. It's the best cuisine in the world for me. And I was flipping through the pages, and I said, I know the dishes I want to change. And he looked at me, and he came with the food and beverage manager, and the food and beverage manager says, I'll get my whites on and I'll do it. I said, no. I said, you can stand and watch from there, but I'm going to do this. And I said, I want to get this done, and I want to get that done. So one of the dishes, and it's a very appropriate thing, this was a trout almondine. Quite a simple dish. So we had done it on the menu, but because of the pictures of what I had seen, I wanted to dress this dish up. I said, no, I want to do it my way. I didn't think for 1 minute, I just thought, it's my chance to show them what I can do for some reason. I don't know why I did it. And we set about doing it. So I thought, right, how can I make this? Because everything was silver served in those days. So I had these silver platters, and I decided to make a nice presentation in the insert of the platter. And I thought, okay, trout swims, I'm going to make a little pool, but we have to set the pool. And because it was trout with almonds, I decided to put the almonds dressed all the way around it. And this was just for a presentation. Now, if you're serving hot food on gelatine, what happens? It melts. So I thought, and I didn't think of that until it came up on the dish. So I said, okay, I've got to change how I'm doing the dish now. And I wanted the fish to be standing up so it was swimming in this pool. So what I had done was made a sockle out of tin foil, sat the fish on it, baked it, and then I took all the fin out, but put the almonds in the top to make them into fins, as it were. So I cooked this, and I thought, wow, this looks good. It's standing up there. And then I went to put it on I can't do that. It's too hot. So I had to make a fresh one, sit it on there. So these fish were sitting on there, proud as punch with their almonds on, and off they went out. And I was very pleased with myself. Now, I've told this story a lot to young chefs of what not to do, of course, because it was a blue tint to the pool as well. Of course, it's a very bad food color. And I sent this out, and I remember it was a man, a young family, husband and wife with their 2 children. And the husband had the trout. And this is the first time ever I was asked to go out to see a customer. So I went out to see him, and he gave me a tip of 50 pence. I think it was 10 shillings at the time, but
wow.
He gave me, and that was a lot of money to me. And of course, the general manager heard that straight away in the food and beverage. He said, blinking heck, you're good at this, aren't you?
Well, that's brilliant, because you were thinking on the spot. Had you even practiced this dish?
No.
It was on the spot. So that's incredible.
Can you imagine? I had to change the design because I hadn't even thought through the gelatine, because if the hot fish had touched it, I was in trouble. But it was very much on the spot. But I tell people, young chefs, this as not what to do, for the simple reason of, the style wasn't quite right, but it was just me bursting out of myself and trying to say, this is what I am.
Yeah. And let's remember, this whole time you are still at college, aren't you? You are still studying at the same time.
Yeah, I was only 16 and a half.
Yeah.
Because all of these little things, but I always had people who were commenting on what I was doing. As I said, the general manager's wife was quite an inspiration. And she used to talk a lot to me, she says, you've got to better yourself, you've got to do this, you've got to do that. What I didn't realize was this was feeding my brain as to what I was going to do. And I suddenly, I think I was there about 11 months, and I suddenly said to myself, if I want to cook the kind of food, I wanted to cook haute cuisine. I wanted to cook expensive ingredients. And something pulled me towards London. And I believe what that pull was, if I wanted to cook those ingredients, I would have to go where the money was, London. Yeah. The kind of establishments that would have these ingredients. So I thought, right, off I'll go. I wrote a letter to the Royal Garden Hotel, and I had a telephone interview. I didn't have to travel down. And I was offered a job straight away.
Amazing.
And from my £9 a week, suddenly I was getting paid £27 a week for a job. I was doing the same job, but going to college in my own time, which was the same anyway. So I said, well, I'll enroll in college when I get down, and off I go. I arrived in London. At that time, it was quite a move for a person so young. I still wasn't 17. And I arrived in London, got to the Royal Garden. They had living in accommodation, and off I started. And I was very fortunate. I worked with some very, very good chefs. It was a very big brigade, a very busy operation as well at that time. my first day there was a banquet for 400 lunch and a banquet for 300 dinner.
Wow.
So the kitchen was, and it had other things happening. And they had a French restaurant called the Royal Roof Restaurant. And it was a great restaurant. And it was up on the 10th floor. It's now a Chinese restaurant on the 10th floor, but at that time it was the Royal Roof Restaurant. And I worked in the main kitchen on 2 or 3 sections, and I said to the chef, I said, "Chef, I want to go and work upstairs." He said, "John, they're all French." He said, "You've got 2 Japanese and the rest are all French. You'll not be able to cope." I said, "I beg your pardon?" I said, "Do they not speak English?" He said, "Very little." I said, "That doesn't matter. That's what I want to do. I want to cook like them. I don't want to do this. I want to cook." And I pushed him, but he did like me. And anyway, this was a sort of a form. But what happened at the same time, I was becoming very, very homesick. And after a year, I actually said, "Sorry, chef, but I'm going to have to leave. I need to go back home." And I remember telling my mom, I came back in the Northeast, started in a hotel. They gave me another rise because I had London experience.
Right.
And I started. And this is the God's honest truth. We're going back to potatoes. And there was this young lad who was probably 2 or 3 years older than me, running the vegetable section. I went on to the vegetable section, and he had this big pot of potatoes that had been, I don't know if you know what a potato rumbler is. It's a machine, a big, big machine. You put potatoes in, they spin around, and they take the skins off, but it bruises the potatoes. They're not great machines, but they used to be used then. And he had taken some new potatoes and put them through the rumbler, and they didn't look particularly good, and they were bruised left, right, and center. But there was 100 portions of potatoes in a big pot. And he said, "Can you give me a hand to put this on the back there?" And there was 2 bricks on top of the stove, because they were gas stoves then and hard plates. And he put them on there, and I realized the time, it was 12 o'clock. And at 12 o'clock, I said, "You know, this is a little bit late to be putting these potatoes on. They're going to probably take an hour and a half half an hour to come to the boil at least." Mm-hmm. Anyway, he said to me, "No, there's no worries. Just put them on the brick, and that's definitely going to take an hour and a half." And I said, "But they're not going to be cooked." He said, "Yeah, but they will be by 2 o'clock. Otherwise, they'll be overcooked at 2 o'clock." I thought, there's something not right here. And I spent 3 shifts in this establishment. And then I remember going home, and I said to my mum, "Mum, I've left." She said, "What?" I said, "I've left." She said, "I can't believe it." I said, "No, I know what I'm doing." I said, "Yeah, I've told you I'm homesick, but I know it is the biggest mistake that I've made." While my mum was still sitting there, I picked the phone up. I telephoned Remy Fougère, the executive chef of the Royal Garden where I had just left.
Yeah.
I said, "Chef, I've made a big mistake." He said, "Oh yeah, what's that?" I said, "I shouldn't have come back up north. I want my job back." He said, "I'll see you on Monday." So I didn't really leave. I had a small excursion up in the Northeast, and that was it. I knew then that I had to overcome everything and just get on with it.
Yeah.
And
So
off I started back in the Royal Garden.
That you made. You kind of, just had to get over the fact of not being at home.
Yeah.
Getting over that comfort factor of being, I guess, you were just so homesick you had to go back. But it was more important to you to have a good career in a good kitchen to work in 100%. And have that skill around you.
Yeah, it's, even this, when I went into that kitchen, I still smell the aromas that I didn't like. I didn't like, now this goes back to the toque. Everybody used to wear toques and things then. but the toques were not clean that the people were wearing because they were starched hats. They were old-fashioned starched hats. And, you know, if people would get marks on them and touch them, and of course they didn't always, they didn't represent the cleanest things. And I didn't like that. I didn't like the aromas in the kitchen. And that was it for me. I said, no, I don't want to work somewhere that the smells are not good. So I immediately went back down to the Royal Garden. I spent another 6 months in the main kitchen, and I went to see Mr. Fougere again, and he said, okay, we've got a position upstairs. We're going to let you go upstairs. And then I spent time in the restaurant on all of the sections as a commie. I finished my college. I carried on working, and suddenly there was a situation that arose, and the executive chef came up and he says, you're doing quite well. He said, do you think you can manage the sauce? Because he had called me in to speak to me about this. And I said, what do you mean by that? I said, I've done it with Paul. I've done it with Rene. I said, you know, I know exactly what they're doing. He says, can you cook the sauces? I said, anything I can't do, I'll make sure that it is done in the right way. He said, well, that's good. He says, because I've just fired the saucier. And I thought, oh, okay. And I thought, wow, he thinks that much of me.
Yeah.
And I was willing to do whatever for that man. And there were certain times, our restaurant was only open at dinner. And we used to start about 2 o'clock and finish at about 1 o'clock in the morning. And at lunch, he would often do very special functions up in that room. And it was usually when the car show was on, but he used to cook them personally. And that was the only time you ever seen him cook. But he used to call me and say, okay, you're coming to do this party with me. And I'd say, yeah, lovely. And that was when I really learned how good of a cook he really was. Because he was the executive, he didn't really do that much. And I remember one particular dish was a wild duck. And he did it with sweetbreads and oysters and a truffle sauce. And this is the God's honest truth. Just on this banquet, and I thought, this is amazing. And I entered a competition in Olympia. And it was the duck. This competition is still run today. But at the time, it used to have 60 entrants for the senior. Now, at that time, I think I was 19. And generally speaking, the duck competition was for 21-year-olds and over. And I thought, I'm going to do it anyway. I didn't care. And I ended the dish, and I was in the first heat. And it was that same dish that I had modified with Remy. And the chairman of the judges came up after the first heat. I think it was 10 people in the first heat. So there's 6 more heats. And it was a very prized competition in Olympia at that time. And he came up and he said, how do you feel? I said, yeah, I'm okay. Yes, thank you. And I didn't know what he was really referring to. He says, did you enjoy that? I said, yeah, I think I got the job done. I'm very happy. And the duck dish, I wanted to show the duck dish because my boss cooked this dish and I was inspired by it. He said, did you do it well? And I said, well, I hope so. Because I couldn't really be 100% sure. He says, how do you feel? And I thought, why does he keep asking me this? So there was a heat that I watched straight after, and he came straight up and he says, how do you feel now? I said, I think I'm okay. I still hadn't clicked. I think it was naivety. And lo and behold, I had to go back to work. So I was not able to see because there were hour slots.
Right.
And the very next morning, I got a telephone call and they said, you weren't here to pick up your prize. And I said, what prize? They said, you won the gold medal for the duck.
Wow.
And I thought, Lincoln, heck, I wasn't even there to receive it. And I told my boss, and he knew that I used to sort of copy things he did. And he had a Mont Blanc pen. And this was what, 1978, 79. And he gave me, from the hotel, £100. And he said, you'll be able to get your Mont Blanc, because I always just tell him, I want one of them. He used to always wear his Mont Blanc there. Now, anybody that knows me, I've always got a Mont Blanc. And I had this Mont Blanc fountain pen, and I bought it on the back. I think it was £110, and I got 100, so I had to pay the extra 10. And I had that pen for, it must have been about 40 years, and somebody stole it, and it was desperate, the fact that somebody stole it. I don't know where it went, it just vanished. And it was a very old school Mont Blanc, but it was something that really reminded me of him molding me as well, because he did. He fathered me in so many different ways. And I used to often get opportunities to move around because I was moving up the ranks. I stayed with him 7 years, but I also, when I was in the roof restaurant, as I said, we started at 2 and 3 o'clock in the afternoon. There was a restaurant called Ma Cuisine. Now, Ma Cuisine was the first restaurant, along with the Gavroche, to achieve 2 stars in London. Mm-hmm. It was a fantastic little restaurant. There's only about 35 seats, and they used to do about 45 lunches and about 50 dinners. And they used to work 5 days a week, so it was packed. And a friend of mine managed to, I said, I'll go and work for them 3 days a week, but I can only work from the morning start, and they used to start at 8:30. And I said, I have to leave by about 2:15 because I have to get into work. And
Back
they were
to
in
the Royal Garden Hotel at this point.
Yeah, I was still working there. Yeah. But I didn't get paid for it. I just went to get experience because it was such a different way of working. And Guy Mouron was the chef patron, and they were master at delivering food. What used to really impress me, his wife was the front of house, he was the chef, and he had 3 Japanese and 2 French guys. Mm-hmm. And the way that they cooked, everything was cooked what we call à la minute. They would have their base sauce, and then everything was just cooked at the moment. And they used to go, la belle, and they'd ring a bell, and the waiter had to be there, and off they went. But the most amazing thing was his wife used to, for a lunchtime, used to have a list on the menu. She didn't look at the menu. She said, right, give me the list. How many portions you've got of this? How many portions you've got of that? And she would just come in, and she took all of the orders, and she'd just mark off everything that she had sold and then move on to the next thing. And I promise you, there would be 1 or 2 portions maximum. Everything would be sold. So it was sold on the day, on the spot, as freshest product that you could. And it was something that really penetrated my mind about the delivery of great food being just cooked at the right moment, but making sure you utilize every single thing. So that was a great experience. It built me up and learned me other things, especially on the business side. And I was moving up the ranks. I then became sous chef. Remy decided that I needed to do some more banqueting and larger. They also had a restaurant on the ground floor then. It was like an international style restaurant. And I worked all over in the Royal Garden. I don't think there's any place where I didn't physically work. And he said, you're going to come down and you're taking care of the smaller parties and things like that, the specialist ones. And I did that for a while. Then he promoted me up again until I became premier sous chef. But there was a position of sous chef came up in the restaurant, and he was a bit stuck to get someone. He said, do you want to go back up there? I said, let me go back up. That's my home. I'm going back. So I went up there as sous chef. I was only 21, which was outrageous. I had guys that were 36 standing on the stove. So it was slightly out of kilter, but he had great trust in me. And he was like a father, and he was nurturing me from a distance. And then I started writing menus. Chef, I need to have this. Chef, I need to have that. And he'd buy it for me, and and it was an amazing time.
Sounds like an
And
amazing mentor.
he knew how to handle me. I think that's the truth. He was a little bit more. I felt he was like a father. I had a lot of people when I was young who took an interest in me and were very good to me, because in those days, as a young Geordie, you'd be feeling quite inferior and how people would take the accent. I think it's a very different environment nowadays, but then it was almost as though you could be second-class citizen, but I wasn't. They were pushing me.
Mm-hmm.
And I really did feel very comfortable. I was very pushy at times. I was also very obedient with what the rules were, but I would try and push boundaries and try and say, we need to do this, we need to. And he really did allow me a space to work within every now and then. Of course, he would say, just do that, don't do that, just do that. Mm. And he was always letting me do, push boundaries is the one of another word. But as it was progressing, I stayed there a total of 7 years, and I had done most of the kitchen. And suddenly I had opportunities to move in various areas, which I never went for one reason or another. There must have been times when I said, I'm leaving. And they would come back and give me a rise, or they would tell me this and that and say, you have to educate yourself. And the last time when I did have one opportunity, and that was a very important moment, where I went to Mr. Fougere and I said, I'm leaving. He said, you're leaving? He said, that's ridiculous. I said, no, I'm leaving. And he sat me down and tried to persuade me. He said, where are you going? I said, have you heard of Albert Roux? He says, of course, Albert's a friend of mine. I said, well, I went to see Albert Roux this morning. He hasn't got a job in the Gavroche, but he has a man who is opening a restaurant. And he said, who's that? I said, I think his name is Pierre Kaufman. And he's opening a place called Tante Claire. And he said, yeah, but that's not right for you. I said, no, I'm going this time. This time I'm going. So then that night, the general manager, Mr. James Brown, who still comes and sees me to this day, comes and sometimes has a lunch with a couple of friends in my office. He sat me down, and it was very, very important advice. He said, okay, young man. He says, what's this? I hear you want to go. I said, I want to go to this restaurant. He said, well, it's a new restaurant. You don't know anything about it. I said, true, but I've been told that it's going to be very good. He said, that's not the point. He said, I'm a general manager. Let me tell you how I look at things. He said, so you want to become a chef? I said, I want to become a chef. He said, what kind of a chef do you want to be? I said, I want to be one of the best. He said, okay, there's certain things that you have to look at. He said, in my position in a hotel, for you to become a head chef in this hotel, if you were coming from a small restaurant, I wouldn't even look at you. I said, why? I said, if I learn how to cook the good food, he said, there's much more to that. He says, you have to understand how to manage. You have to understand how to place people, to build a team, to do this. And suddenly I went, oh. And he was able to persuade me, and he used to call me his secret weapon. And we had a little chuckle about it a couple of years ago. I said, can you remember what you used to call me? He said, I remember, yes. He said, I can remember the conversation I had with you to sort your head out. And it was just, as a career thing, it's something that did stick, to learn how to manage. And if you think how bad some of the kitchens have been probably in the last 30 or 40 years of chefs not being able or taught how to manage and how to manage people. That's one of the biggest problems we have. Because what we do is we are creators. And it's just making sure that you create. You follow me and create like this, and that's it. Whereas they should be stepping back at time. And how can we teach these people to recreate this? So it was a very important factor. So on that occasion, I still did stay.
And in hindsight, are you happy that you stayed?
Yes.
You are?
Yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah. You know, I mean, I don't really have any regrets on anything I had. I had opportunities. I did try to go to France, but that didn't quite work out. But the good thing about this, I carried on working, and then suddenly Remy came to me. I'll never forget this. He said, "John, I think it's time for you to leave." I felt like he was sacking me. I said, "What?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "Do you know why?" I said, "No." He says, "I've just bought a restaurant and you're going to become head chef." And I remember that it's quite an important moment. He invited me for dinner she was my fiancée at the time. He says, "Come for dinner and we're going to have a discussion about it." And I arrived at this house in Denham, Denham Village. The next door neighbor was Cilla Black. And he's a very famous English actor. He's one of the most iconic English actors there is. I'll remember it in a minute. And the house was absolutely stunning. And I said to myself, if this is what head chefs get, this is what I've got to do. And he said to me, "So you're going to be a director of the restaurant. You're going to do this, we're going to do that. You'll learn how to do the business and we'll build it up." I said, "Okay, we're off." And we opened that restaurant. The restaurant was basically an Indian restaurant before. We basically did everything ourselves. From kitchen, there was people that came in and tiled the kitchen and things. But I revamped whatever we had. We had a bit of space. And they actually did the front of house themselves.
Mm-hmm. And this
wasn't the most beautiful
Crocodile.
Yeah, and that was in Kensington Church Street. So it was just up the road from the Royal Garden. And we opened up, and it was a little bit quiet for the first couple of weeks, but I was working extremely hard. It was probably the hardest I ever worked in my life. That's for sure. To set it up and make it work. And I used to get up twice a week at about 4 o'clock in the morning and go to the markets, because at that time, all of the great French chefs used to advertise themselves as going to the market, and everybody was copying that in England.
Yeah.
And myself and a friend, chef, we said, we're going to do that. And we used to go to the markets, and it's amazing the money we saved. Remy, I used to say to Remy, "I'm going to the market." He says, "Oh, here's 100 quid, quick, go." It was because it was saving so much money. I was probably 2/3 of the value, taken off the price.
But also there's a romance about knowing that the chef who's cooking for you has gone shopping himself and chosen the ingredients.
Yeah,
There's something so lovely about that.
But it's also very inspirational for the chef. If you have no concept of what you're going to do and walking around a market and you get the smell of the melons and things like that, or fruit that you're there, you go and buy them.
Yeah.
And, that inspires you to cook in a very, very specific way. So I was learning about business, about costs, about quality, and I was really, really working extremely hard. As I say, I would work 6 days a week. Mm-hmm. I was basically doing the market up to twice a week. And then I would work through basically my normal working day would be 8:30 until about 11:30 at night. And when you do that 5 days, my half day was Saturday. I used to start at 12 o'clock and finish at, 11:30. But it was hard.
Yeah.
And when I say hard, I used to run for 14 hours a day around the kitchen to make sure we had things. And for one reason or another, I was actually looking at the whole project because the idea was that I would take over the whole reins of this restaurant. And what happened was the chap that I used to go to the market with came in with his boss. And he said to me, I think you should actually have a word with Mario Leshnik. I said, why? His boss then chipped in. She said, well, I know he's looking for a chef, and the decor of this restaurant doesn't suit the food that you are cooking. And it hurt.
Right.
It isn't the reason why I left, but it was something that was very poignant to me. And I had met Mario a couple of weeks before, not weeks before, a year or so before, where we had chatted about employment. And I picked the phone up and rang him. He says, why don't you come in today? So I went across to see him. And you have to remember, in those days, when you went for an interview, you had a suit, a shirt, and a tie, especially going to somewhere like Clarence. And off I went. I sat down with him, we talked, he asked me things, and he said, yeah. He says, you're the man for... Now, I was only 27 then. I had done this little bit of experience, etc. And Mario said, yeah, I would love you to have on board. So next day, I got a telephone call from him. He said, do you mind popping in and seeing me again? I said, well, yeah, if you want, yeah. I said, the only thing is, I said, I want you to understand, if I come in, I'm not in my shirt and tie. I've just come to work, and I'm just going to be coming in the afternoon in the split. He said, that's fine, that's fine. I arrives, and he said, oh, Mr. Jones would just like to have a word with you. Mr. Jones was the managing director of Claridge's, one of the finest hoteliers, a real British gentleman of the bastion of hotels, but he was a real pure gent. And Mr. Jones had opened the Royal Garden. So there's an affiliation. He also knew Remy Fougère very well. And they said, well, you just pop up and see him. So I was very casually dressed. I wasn't a mess, but not what I would say suitable to have any kind of interview. So that knocked me. It really knocked me for six.
Right.
Especially when I arrived into his office. This is God's honest truth. There were some 5 people in morning suits.
Wow.
Sitting there, and they started firing questions at me.
Oh, good grief.
I wasn't ready for this. Anyway, I answered the questions. I thanked them very, very much indeed. And it was just questions like, how do you feel about photography in kitchens and learning? How would you teach people to make things? It was questions like that. Anyway, I said, thank you very much, walked downstairs. By the time I got downstairs, Mario said to me, he said, you must have made one hell of an impression. I said, why? He said, Mr. Jones just said, hire that man as quick as you can.
Amazing.
And I decided to move in. It was a very specific time because it was the moment that I said, I'm going to focus my life on hotels and on hotels only. I think it was the hard work that I had put into the restaurant. I can't tell you the energy that I had used. It was extreme. And it's a tough life. You know, I don't hide that, especially when you're building a business or really just opening up a business. it's the hardest time. And I did that for 2.5 years. And anyway, I thought I had learned a bit about business and did this, that, and the other. But my mind was very focused on becoming a top hotel chef. But it was going to be a very, very specific environment.
Right.
So I started in Claridge's. What I should tell you, I'm going to jump back because there is an important factor. While I was in the Royal Garden at the age of probably 18, I came out of Green Park station and I literally walked past the Ritz for the first time. And inside the Ritz at that particular time, the windows on the front, as you go through the arches, there was a set of crockery that basically it was brought up from a shipwreck, which the hotel had owned. And it said for £25 extra, you can dine on this crockery, which came from this ship that they owned. And I said, 25, that's more than the meal. If you imagine something like about £200, we're talking very serious money with where the value was. And I thought, wow, that's a bit special, Mr. Ritz. And I thought, one day I might that was my first introduction to the Ritz. And I thought, maybe one day I'll cook there. So I think it's important to get that point out because it was quite a significant moment.
Well, you had already said it. You'd already said it on your first date with the au pair that you were a Ritz chef. So
yeah,
this is already sort of, put what you want out there and, you can manifest it, make it happen.
Yeah, it's quite an interesting one. So anyway, I thought I should mention that element because I thought it was my first exposure. I didn't think for 1 minute where it was going to go, but it was a very important moment.
And just out of curiosity, does the Ritz still have that crockery?
Actually, I told the story to Sir Frederick, who was our owner, Sir Frederick Berkeley, and he said, John, I still have that crockery.
No way, amazing.
He has it.
Fabulous.
Yeah. So that's quite an important one.
Yeah.
So I arrive at Claridge's, and Claridge's was great bastion of tradition. You were cooking for people there of the highest caliber. And that's all I can say on the universe. The Savoy Group was set up in such a way. The Savoy was for celebrity and film stars. The Connaught was the American super rich club. This is the way the Savoy Group set it up. Claridge's was for heads of state and captains of industry. The Berkeley was for the nouveau riche. So it was set out in a very specific way. And the people that came through the doors of Claridge's was mind-blowing at the time, and fortunate to cook for functions, they were mind-boggling. I mean, I've done 3 or 4 American presidents. For me, there's only one people or set of people that really inspire me and make me nervous. And that's our royal family. And I've been very fortunate to do state functions for Her Majesty.
Yeah.
I've cooked lots of times for her. I cooked for her a couple of years back at a private dinner within the grounds of Buckingham Palace, which was a great honor. And I think one of the best men on this planet is Prince of Wales. He's such a clever, forward-thinking man. He's also the patron of the Royal Academy, so I've had the pleasure to have some very limited conversations with him. And I find him amazingly clever. So I feel great pride. If you tell me a pop star, rock star, or a movie star, celebrity doesn't get me at all. But special people do. And I'll tell you the story about Margaret Thatcher. That's certainly it starts in Claridge's, but it finishes in the Ritz. So you must not let me forget to tell you that story.
Absolutely not.
So there were really people that, you know, were so high on a status throughout the world. You'd just be aghast on a daily basis. I promise you, the people that used to come in. Just for example, you know, Princess Diana used to be a regular in the causerie, not in the main restaurant, in the causerie with her father. And, you know, nobody batted an eyelid. There was always someone in Claridge's at that time.
Mm.
And I think things have changed now in hotels where it's not quite as prevalent as they were then. But my memories of it were just amazing.
Wonderful.
And I started as premier sous chef at 27.
Mm-hmm.
And my goal, I remember distinctly, whatever you do, just try and understand what's happening before you open your mouth. And I remember staying very quiet for about 6 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody, you know, wasn't in the correct way, and I give them a very, very tough telling off. And the big thing around the whole kitchen was, we thought he was such a nice man. Have you seen him when he gets angry? Anyway, it was a building process of learning how to manage a real big team. There were some 70 chefs.
Yeah.
Everything at the start, everything was coming out of the one kitchen, whether it was banquets, whether it was restaurant, whatever. They used to have breakdown areas of where you did it. But it was such, you know, I've arrived. This is what I want to do. Mm-hmm. And the ingredients, you know, no matter what you wanted, mm-hmm. you just went out and bought it. And if it wasn't available, you got somebody that made it available. It was, honestly, that's the way it was. And the whole ethos was, you know, if the costs go up a little bit and we can justify them because it was a quality ingredient, etc., that's what you must do. But if you get the quality wrong, you would get the right telling off. Yeah. So it was, you know, there was a good ethos in every sense. Yeah. And as it was part of the Savoy group, I think it had gone through a bad time, Claridge's. And when I joined, I wanted to put a lot of things in place, a discipline of how there were some great cooks there, but the discipline wasn't always there. And I'm a person that likes structure and organization so that everybody knows what their expectation is. And I set out to do that and concentrate and build my career. I did a lot of competitions at that time. The strong competitions at the time were the Titanger, which I represented Great Britain in twice. I won the British aspect of it a couple of times. Yeah. You know, there were lots of different things to get yourself really out there and do what you needed to do. But my main concentration was delivering the functions, the restaurant, etc., within there. And I was building this all the time. And I had a great time with Mario Leshnik, who was the executive sous chef, the head chef, sorry. Or in those days, they were called maître chef de cuisine. And Mario was a great character. He understood me. We were chalk and cheese. He was an amazing cook, a great saucier, and we would do different things. I remember one particular function, and it was for a state function. Mm-hmm. And we were told, it was from Morocco, and we were told, you will not be cooking, you will just be assisting with the space and helping the people to deliver. They were bringing their whole team from the palace from Morocco. And off they went. Okay, that's all fine. At 10 o'clock, the night before the function, I popped into the office and the chef he said, can you just pop in the office? And he says, because I'm going home. I said, okay. I said, I'll finish off and then I'll be off anyway. Because we both lived north. He lived in St. Albans and I lived in Leverstock Green at the time. And just then the telephone rang and it was one of the organisers of the dinner for this state function. And they said, we need you to do the dessert for tomorrow. I said, I beg your pardon? We haven't ordered anything. We haven't got anything. They said, well, I'm sure you can get something. I said, well, why couldn't you tell it that, that's what they want? So he said, what are we going to do? I said, well, can we propose some dishes to them? So we sat down, we proposed 4 dishes and then waited for the response. And they said, we'll get back to you. 10:30 came, no response. 11 o'clock came. They said, okay, we can't get the king to decide. So what we would suggest is we'll do these dishes. And we said, but we can't. Do you realize how long these will take? And they said, well, how long does it? So they made us break everything down. And there was a souffle glace with peach. And they said, how long will it take for you to make? I said, well, it will take us 3 hours to do this, 4 hours to do that. And it will take 12 hours freezing time because it was a large one. And they said, well, that's only 16 hours. You've got 18 hours to the function. And they went on like this. And we went through the 4 desserts. They said, okay, make the 4 desserts. And we looked at each other and we said, we're going to be here all night. I said, okay. He said, we're going to have a team of 4. There was Mario was one team. I was another team. And then we had the pastry chef and the sous chef. They had another 2 teams. So we broke it down. They all had three people each just to make this dessert. And off we went. We got everything together. It was the most nerve-wracking because it is actually nerve-wracking. Like, I can't emphasize the kind of people, the very best, highest echelon of British society, ministers, royalty, everybody's there that, are really needed. And we put this together. We managed to go for a sleep at about 7 o'clock in the morning until 9 o'clock. And then we were back and we still hadn't learned what the dessert was. Oh, and eventually at about 2:30, they announced it was going to be the peach souffle, which I had made. And off we went. And we actually produced this. And it was just another crazy, crazy time of how we used to operate. Amazing. Those kind of things wouldn't happen nowadays, but it is, time changes, but it was amazing to be part of something like that. And this would, honestly, things like this would happen fairly regular to some degree, not to that extent. But, somebody special came in, we need this. And that's the way it was. It was always conservative food, but it was a joy because it was everything that I wanted to cook. You had the most beautiful ingredients that you had access to, but ingredients are getting better and better across the board anyway now. Yeah. But, we did have that access, and that was something that I was so proud to be able to be part of. We rebuilt a kitchen there. There were so many things that went on, but I was getting to the age I think I was 33. I was 32 or 31 when the Ritz head chef came up, and I applied for the job.
Okay.
And it was such big news. This is the God's honest truth. In the Times, there was an article to say that someone had made a book. I don't know if it was William Hill or something like that, but they had set a book and betting on who was going to get the job as executive chef of the Ritz.
Right.
And I was second favorite. And off I went. And we had an interview. They came and ate my food in the restaurant in Claridge's. But in the end, the person that got the job, who was the favorite, was David Nichols. And David got the job, and I've still got the letter today from the general manager at the time. And he said to me, he said, "I'm very sorry, basically we've chosen David because he has executive chef position already, and we need somebody that has that track record," which I said, fair enough. And I remember meeting him and saying, "You've made a mistake." And he came into the restaurant probably about a year ago, 18 months. And the first thing I said to him, I said, "I've still got the letter," and he still made a mistake. So when he comes back in now, he always says to me, "I know, I made the biggest mistake of my life." But that was another thing.
So how did things change around then? How did you manage to become the executive chef of the restaurant?
It goes on a little bit longer.
Okay.
But what actually happened, I was now in a position, I actually had two children. At the age of 33, moving on to 33. And, I got to the stage, I was living in an apartment in Cromwell Crescent in Earl's Court, just off the Cromwell Road.
Yeah.
And it was we didn't have any lifts, and it was 3 flights up, and my wife had 2 young children. And it was quite a thing for her. And I said, "We've got to move, it's time." And I was pressurizing the managing director of the Savoy Group, Mr. Giles Shepherd. And I said, "Mr. Shepherd, I'm looking for an executive position." He says, "You're going to be the next head chef in this group, don't worry." And I said, "I can't wait." And then lo and behold, I was offered a position in another hotel by he was the general manager at the time, Mr. Raman Paharas, who was the world hotelier of the world at that time. I mean, he was a special man. And he was recruiting for a hotel at the time. And he says, "We'd like to offer you the job." And of course, when that went back to the hotel, they suddenly made sure that that happened. And the chef retired. And within 4 months, I was in place in the Berkeley Hotel.
Okay.
Now, I arrived at the Berkeley, and I just felt it needed a good shake, really relooking at everything that we were doing, and we had to make improvements. And I set about that, but within 6 months of that happening, the same Mr. Raman Paharas joined the Savoy Group as managing director of the Savoy Group. There had been a change in management, a whole shift for all kinds of reasons after the 90s. And, the group hadn't really changed, and they hadn't adapted to the great pressures of the 90s, of the Gulf War, etc., and how the recession took in place. They didn't bother doing anything. But Raman Paharas came on board, and he said to me, he grabbed me and he says, "I'm really pleased to be working on you, but you're the young man of the chefs in the Savoy Group now. I'm going to work on you." And it was all about managing and changing how we operated to make it a little bit more streamlined without changing anything out front.
Right.
And I said, "Okay." That's me. And I worked very, very hard, listened to everything Mr. Paharas had wanted. And he said, this is what we've got to do. This is how we've got to do it. And he would forever say, you know, John Williams this, John Williams that. And I thought, this is good. Because for me, it was a great opportunity. I think some of the chefs who were some of the greatest chefs of their time were saying to me, you be careful what you're doing. You know, don't do everything that they're saying. But I thought, I've got to listen to my own advice, go the way that I see is the best way forward for me. Mm. And I was only in the Berkeley as executive chef for 18 months. And lo and behold, I got a telephone call from Mr. Paharas. And he said, John, he said, I have some news for you. I want you to go back home. I said, home? I said, Claridge's? He said, that's where you're going. And I cried because that's where I wanted to be. Oh. The Berkeley was nothing but a stepping stone for me. And I already had the vision of which hotels I wanted to be executive chef. And I had probably 3 hotels that I really wanted to. I've had lots of opportunities, you know, Savoy, you know, Claridge's, the Connaught. All of these places are great, but the hotels that I wanted to work in were certainly those types. But the Savoy I ruled out. After a while, I thought it was too big. I wanted to know that I could control all aspects of the kitchen. And I practiced everything. And when I got back to Claridge's, the first thing Mr. Paharas said to me, he said, everything that you have done in the Berkeley, you have to do in Claridge's. So it was a great time of change, of streamlining to some degree and working very heavily within the budgets, learning and understanding budgets and understanding money, but also stretching the boundaries with what you were cooking for, whether it was a function in the restaurant or whatever. And I enjoyed the time of total rebuilding to some degree. And there was lots of change because suddenly we were plating banquets where they hadn't done that before in Claridge's. Mm-hmm. And it was a great opportunity for me to put the stamp of what I wanted to do. And I took more control of everything that was getting into the restaurants and the dining rooms or banquets. And I thoroughly enjoyed the time. And I still say, I often go back to Claridge's and do talks for various things, especially the Royal Academy of Culinary Arts. And I always say, I'm so happy to be back in the second best hotel in the world. Because it is my favorite. You know, I love it deeply. It's just that I'm no longer there.
And have you been to the new Davies and Brooks? So it's not new anymore. But...
Yes, yeah. I had a lovely dinner there when they first opened.
Yeah.
About a team of 7 or 8 of us went and had dinner.
Stunning, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I adore that restaurant.
Yeah. You know, well, that restaurant was very different in those days.
It was Gordon
Ramsay. It's the same restaurant. Yeah. Well, before that.
Even before that was really,
Yeah. And, you know, I went through a lot of different things where I actually felt that I was a very good, strong maître chef of Claridge's. However, we were bought again by an American investment company, and they came and said, we want a chef to represent the Savoy Group on a world-class stage, a young man, and this is what this person will look like. And we didn't know what that meant really, you know. But that was Gordon Ramsay. And Gordon Ramsay obviously had a restaurant in every Savoy hotel at the time. And for me, it was a little bit of a blow, to say the least. And in between, I had a couple of opportunities I was offered to go to the Ritz, and I knocked them back twice.
Okay.
But I felt, just because I was in Claridge's and I was going through a process.
Yeah, yeah.
And because the managing director, Giles Shepherd, who had been in the Savoy, was now managing director in the Ritz for the Barclays. And he contacted me and said, I would like you to come. And he offered me the job twice. But it didn't quite click at that time. I wanted to work for him again, but it was just that moment, it wasn't the right time. And anyway, when Gordon Ramsay was brought on board, I was then placed as the executive chef and food and beverage manager. And I did a little bit more up front, and, you know, everybody was still great. The hotel was still great. It's just that for me, it was a very important factor to retain your restaurant in every sense of the word. And when you took that away, you took away my platform. And I don't believe that you should do that. I think it's one of the problems in hotels. Hotels have to spend more time, more money in making the business better. I feel that, you know, restaurateurs, what they've done is they've shown you have to invest and you have to make sure that you give the customer, you know, hospitality, the finest of food, the best kind of service. Whereas hotels were very expensive in their products, in what they were selling, and probably for the wrong reasons. But it has now changed. There's been a real, you know, evolution of how one sets about having restaurants in hotels. But it wasn't for me. I then decided I'm leaving Claridge's. As much as I didn't want to, I knew I had to. And then, of course, I had an opportunity. I went for another interview in the Ritz, and it didn't work.
Which year is this? Because I know you started in the Ritz in 2004. So
this was in 2003.
This is okay. So this is
2000. The year earlier.
Went back.
And I had an interview, and I remember coming out of the interview, and to cut the long story short, I wasn't feeling that they had the mentality of me. So Mr. Shepherd was waiting to hear what I had to say, because he wasn't interviewing me because he was the chairman. And he said to me, okay, then when are we going to start? I said, no, Mr. Shepherd, I'm not coming. And Michel Bourdin, who was then the chef of the Connaught, and who was one of the biggest head chefs, was helping the Ritz at the time. And he came to me and he said, John, you're making the biggest mistake of your life. You've wanted to leave, but you're not going to leave. I said, when the time is right, I will leave. So I left it at that. They did come back to me a couple of times, and I said, no, I'm sorry, I'm not going to. I said, as much as I love the Ritz, I have to do it in a certain way. Anyway, we're not going into detail, but that's the nuts and bolts of it. And I got a telephone call 2 days after the interview. It was from a man called Stephen Boxall. Stephen Boxall and I had worked together in the Barclay. And he telephoned me up. He said, John, he said, how are you? I said, I'm fine, Stephen. He said, you know, I'm going to be the general manager of the Ritz. I said, are you? He said, yeah. He said, the Barclays are training me and letting me go and get some development, and then I'm going to become general manager. He said, and that's going to be in a year's time. He says, I want to know if I can contact you to be executive chef of the Ritz. I didn't believe him, but I said, of course, Steve, no problem whatsoever. Get in touch. Because he was the restaurant manager. So the jump from restaurant manager to becoming a general manager in that modern day age is one hell of a jump. So I said, okay, thanks very much, and left it at that. And I carried on working. It was a year to the day. I suddenly got a telephone call. I had just been made chairman of the Royal Academy of Culinary Arts.
Yeah.
And it was honestly a week before. And he said, obviously you can't speak. And he had just joined the academy. So I thought we were going to chat about academy. And he says, are you in the kitchen? I said, yes, I'm in the middle of the kitchen now. He says, okay, you can't speak. How about you pop down and see me on Monday? And I said, okay. So I left that, didn't think another thing of it, because I thought it was just going to be academy business. I popped down to see him, and he says, can you remember the conversation I had last year? And suddenly I clicked. He said, well, I just want you to know I've fired the chef. I said, what? He said, it wasn't working. He said, and I want you to become executive chef. I said, what? Okay. And he says, what will it take? I said, not a lot. I said, what we need to have is an understanding of, value for money for the guest, not overpricing. It was a very, very expensive place to dine. It was a very expensive place to go, the Ritz. But I felt it was out of sync with the value of what people were getting. That was my opinion. And I explained all of this. And I said, I need certain number of staff to be able to maintain things and to make things good. We need to rejuvenate. We need to modernize. I said, we must keep it as classic, but I've got a vision. I said, I love the Ritz dearly. And I feel at home. I feel I know. I feel that everything I've done will fit into the Ritz. And I'm passionate about making this. And he looked at me. He said, don't you think I am? He said, so what's it going to be? I shook his hand and he said, okay. He said, how long is it going to be before you can get here? I said, let me speak to my boss. And then off we come. And it was one of the best things that could have ever happened in my life. I've got a lot to thank Stephen Boxall for. And he was fantastic right the way through. We used to have weekly meetings, and he used to say, I think you need to look at that, John. And I'd say, I think I need that. He said, if you do that, I'll get that. And we used to work, it was a bartering thing, but it was a very jolly situation, and it was for improving. It was always about improving things. How can we make this happen? And it was very simple.
Yeah.
So there was nothing.
Really looking for the right sort of relationship, right working relationship with certain people, in an environment where you feel comfortable to implement changes. So I read that you had already taken on board opinions of critics saying that they didn't think that the food had actually matched the grandness of the room at the Ritz. And yes. I know you made a lot of changes in that aspect. Talk to us about those kind of changes that you made.
Well, that is the most amazing, because that is so true. And in actual fact, I can still show you them. There was probably about 2 or 3 years. And I think what was happening was chefs were given a little bit too much freedom and not understanding what the Ritz is, the values of Cesar Ritz, the values of the building. But the restaurant is more powerful than any chef can ever be, our restaurant, because that sets the stage. Mm-hmm. It makes the hospitality, it makes the ambience, and it makes the feeling that the customer receives when they're dining.
Yeah.
And when that's not in sync, people will not feel so good. Yeah. And I remember I started on it was in June when I actually started in the Ritz. And same situation as Claridge's. I was very quiet for probably the first 6 weeks or so. Basically, just trying to understand why they were doing things, what, you know, in what system, etc., etc. And then one day, same thing as I mentioned before, I got very upset. The service was rubbish. I'm talking from the kitchen point of view.
Yeah.
It didn't work. There was things not in sync. There were products coming up that I wasn't happy. So I remember, I can't whistle. I remember trying to whistle like this to get everybody, and I said, right, listen, every single one of you upstairs in the restaurant now. And I took the whole brigade up into the restaurant. It was in between the service, so there isn't anybody in there. And I took people up there and I said, look up at the ceiling. Everybody was looking up the ceiling. I said, what do you see? What do you feel? And, you know, I got all kinds of comments back. I said, the most important thing is, do you feel the food you are serving is fit for a room like this? And of course, a lot of people, there were some of the more seasoned characters were saying, yeah, of course, of course. And all of the youngsters, predominantly, the youngsters were the one that really got me. And they said, no, chef, it doesn't. Mm. And I said, so that's what we've got to change straight away.
Yeah.
And I said, I want you to feel this and see this so that you can understand what we're trying to achieve. That goes from what we serve food in. One of the things I didn't tell you, that the first thing I did in the Ritz, they had some casserole dishes. They're all made with iron. They're French cooking pots and things, and with brass lids. And I was aghast that they were serving these dishes, certain dishes on them in the Ritz, because it's totally out of sync with what they're doing. And I remember saying to Stephen Boxall, and I said, why on earth are you serving things? And he says, oh, thank God you said that. He says, somebody thinks the same as me. He said, we've just spent £15,000. I said, send it back. He was over the moon.
Oh, wow.
And the whole thing was to actually bring it back to silver, to fine china, and to keep the theme running through. And then, of course, that's translated with the kind of ingredients that one will use. So those were the foundations of what I was doing, but it was all to do with understand. I've read a lot over the years of Cesar Ritz, why he did the thing. And we are actually even doing that now with a refurbishment that's going to go ahead, respecting Cesar Ritz's wishes so that we are still carrying the story on.
Amazing.
Because that's when the Ritz will be at its strength.
Yeah.
In every sense. So for me, it is a very, very important factor because there's nobody bigger than the Ritz. There's nobody bigger than the Ritz restaurant. So we have to bow to that and follow that in every sense of the word.
What's very, very interesting is when you were working at Le Crocodile, you mentioned that, you know, the food was too good for the restaurant.
That was somebody telling me that.
Yeah, somebody told you that. But it's just so interesting that now you're kind of, you know, you're marrying both of those aspects. You know, your food is stunning and now you're in the most stunning venue. And finally, you're in sync with venue and food.
Yeah. And, you know, there were so many things. What you said there, I was very, very particular with the message. I would never say to people, look, I took a word out of the vocabulary of the PR and how we would tell people. I would say, I don't want to hear the word tradition. Mm-hmm. When you think tradition in modern day values, what do people think in food? They think, oh, it's old, it's not this, it's not that, it's not good food. It's just almost lazy when they use the word tradition. Mm-hmm. So I always use the word classic. Mm-hmm. I always say to people, it has to be evolutionary because we have to cook for the modern day diner. And if you're not cooking for them and they're not happy, they'll not come. Mm-hmm. So we have to respect the past, but push forward.
Yeah.
And that's the ethos going through all the time.
Yeah. And, you know, Ritz is famously known for formal wear. Ties for men, for example, are an essential part of day wear within the restaurants. And waiters, they still wear the tailcoats, and you still wear your 30 centimeter high toque. Is that tradition or is that a necessity?
I think that, well, to be perfectly honest, I think that not all of the chefs have always worn hats in the Ritz. I think there was periods when maybe they didn't.
Okay.
This is my take on what I want my chefs and how I want them to operate.
Mm-hmm.
You know, everybody has to be clean shaven. I would never allow beards. It's not hygienic.
Right.
I don't like that. I want people to wear hats because I don't want hair in the food.
Yeah, of course.
They're simple things. They're there for a reason.
Yeah.
And that's why I like that. And people know that I'm a disciplinarian as far as what and how we should do things.
Mm.
It's
And
very important.
of course, Escoffier introduced the toque, and you're a disciple of
Oh,
Escoffier.
yeah.
We have a lot to thank him for, especially the ladies.
Yeah.
He was a man ahead of his time and an inspiration in so many different ways. It would be so interesting for us to know the things that really inspired you about Escoffier.
Well, Escoffier, believe it or not, Escoffier was the partner to Cesar Ritz.
Yes.
I like to think that Cesar Ritz was made famous because of Escoffier. But he had so many dishes, and his understanding of what we call the brigade in the kitchen. He brought the party system. He actually was the first person to use canning in food.
Yes. Yeah.
For the army.
Yeah.
And, you know, but he was a great chef as well as an organizer. And he would bring product from France that we had never seen. But if you see the cooking that is done today, I don't know if maybe you haven't heard this, but a lot of British chefs, they often say now, they say, well, you know, Escoffier has got no relevance today. Let me tell you now, those same people are cooking in some of the styles, but it's Escoffier that brought them. And his foundations of cookery, trust me, are still being used now. Yes, there are some modern techniques, but the understanding and foundation of our cooking today is from Escoffier. It's how you interpret that is really how you cook. Mm-hmm. But everybody is, and we must never forget, and this is what it does really hurt me a little, because British chefs today, they have a lot to thank the French for. The best cooking in Britain today is all influenced by France, even today. And that's my whole thing. And that comes from Escoffier-based recipes. If you read the Escoffier today, the recipes are there. It's how you interpret them. Yeah. What you have to do is evolve them and really make them into a modern day way. And that's the way I cook.
And how do you do that? How do you modernize your dishes to keep them so relevant, but also classic?
I think there's two methods. I think it's always understanding how you're cooking and how you refine. But we have classic recipes, and I have a lot of young men who are trying to push boundaries. So my job is to say, come on, we'll push the boundaries. However, it has to fit under the roof of the Ritz within its style. Mm. So that's the foundation of how we move forward. But it's challenging ourselves and freshening things up. You know, cooking of today is not the same as cooking of 30 years ago, in the sense it's the same recipe. However, there will be a lot lighter in every sense. Mm-hmm. You know, the amount of cream, the amount of butter that we do, it's totally changed. But fundamentally, the recipe is the same. It's just taking less cream, it's taking less butter, and it's how you emulsify the sauce to give the lightness and not have a heart attack.
Yeah.
I mean, it's quite important. There's simple processes, plus with modern day machinery, the degree to how you cook and the temperatures with which you cook. But are we still braising? Are we still roasting? Are we still baking? Are we still poaching? You know, I know a lot of chefs say, my poaching is different. Let me tell you, it's not.
And are you still putting, I mean, if you made the changes to the Jersey Royals, is it still the same amount of butter that your mum used to put on them?
There's no other way. There's
Those
no other way.
haven't changed, have they?
I had Jersey Royals yesterday with my daughter. I had 4 fairly large ones because I shouldn't really have eaten them, but on a Saturday and a Sunday now I'm doing a little bit. And I tell you, I cut them in half. I sprinkled each with a touch of salt on, and then they had a good knob of butter from I had the whole butter dish next to me, just put it on. I can't do it any other way.
You just can't, right? There's just no other way to do it. I totally agree.
Oh, that's for sure.
So you touched on earlier about, the type of people that you've been cooking for. You must have had so many famous people in the restaurant at the Ritz. We know some can be very eccentric. What's the strangest request that you've probably ever gotten from who?
This is what's going to shock you. I haven't really had any strange requests, and I'm not telling you fibs. I've been asked this question quite a lot. I think I've had a couple of times I've been asked for some strange cereals and things for some dietary commands, but honestly, I haven't really been asked. I've been asked for ostrich. It's probably the wildest thing that I've been asked for, honestly.
Okay.
It's interesting. I know a lot of chefs have been asked for things, but I think you have to understand the environments that I've been working in. They're very conservative.
Mm-hmm.
And I really don't have any crazy thing that I've had to cook.
Well, I've actually got a little story for you for a change. So a few years ago, we dined in the little private area behind the curtain in the main restaurant. Actually, it was in
the Ritz room.
Yeah, in 2013. So it's a long time ago now.
You were very, very privileged.
Yes. Well, we were with Jude Law.
Because that didn't happen very often.
Well, we were with Jude Law this evening. It was our family, our kids, Jude Law, and it was quite funny because he snuck in without a tie, and he was actually just wearing like a scarf, and he was very proud of getting away without a tie. It was so sweet because the first thing he said when he came in was started giggling. He said, "I'm in here and I'm not wearing a tie." So he was quite chuffed that he broke the rules. You would have been cooking for us at that time.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I've been there, since 2004, and I've not been drifting away anywhere.
Yeah.
No, I would have been. But that's, in the Ritz room, it's at that particular time, we didn't do many. Was it dinner?
It was dinner, yeah.
Yeah. In dinner time, yeah. Lunch, we never really let it out. Okay. That's why I said you were in a very privileged situation, a small party, private party.
Yeah. It was wonderful.
Did you enjoy it?
Loved it. Yeah.
That's the main thing.
Yeah. The company was great, and Jude Law just kept us entertained all night. So, as I mentioned in my intro, you've been the recipient of numerous awards. Which has been your proudest achievement?
I'm going to say 2. I think the MBE was very, very emotional.
Yeah.
And I thought, I had to think very hard. I said, why have I been given this? And it's obviously the work with which I do within the academy, for training development within the industry.
Yeah.
Because the whole philosophy of the academy is to make the next generation better than what we are, with training and development. And that was, for me, it was a very, very special thing.
Absolutely.
And I remember, you're not allowed to tell anyone. But I remember the first person that I rang up, because I thought, my mum will understand this. I said, Mum, I'm getting an MBE. And
did she believe you?
Oh, yeah. She said, oh my God. Because, for me, saying, oh, I've done this in cookery, what is it? But in MBE, everybody understood that.
Absolutely.
So I felt very, very honored in every sense of the word.
Yeah.
And it was very special in that sense. I've had lots of different awards, in recent years that I'd say, yeah, it's fantastic and I'm over the moon with them. But the MBE was a very, very special award and one that I cherish.
And was it the Queen or another member of the royal family that awarded you?
In actual fact, it was supposed to be the Queen, but she couldn't come on that day for some reason. And I had the Prince of Wales. And I had met the Prince of Wales before. And I distinctly, one of the things he said, I'm very sorry, John, that the Queen will not be here. I said, well, you've just made my day. It was, amazing. I was very fortunate. I have a few friends that work in Buckingham Palace, and I had a terrible day. I left 3 hours, and I only live in Hertfordshire. I left 3 hours before, and the M1 got snarled up, and I was getting late, and I was in such a panic.
Oh, wow.
So much so that I arrived at the gates in Buckingham Palace, and they said, John Williams. I said, how do you know that? You're the last one in. Whoa.
That is so funny.
I got there, and as I was queuing, we had to actually catch up with everything. But I was fortunate because with the name Williams, I was right at the end of being awarded. And suddenly somebody tapped me on the shoulder and said, sir, would you just mind following me? And I was with my daughter and son, and we were taken to a little private room, and I have a couple of friends there, and they said, we couldn't allow you to come and get your award without actually giving you a little glass of champagne. So I felt very privileged as well that I got a little special glass of champagne separately in one of the wing rooms.
Oh, how nice.
And, it was just absolutely amazing. Amazing. And that's the one that will always stay very, very close to my heart.
Yeah.
But another award that I can't not mention is the Michelin Award.
Absolutely.
And that one, to me, it is the most important. When I say important as far as culinary status of what you're trying to achieve, I couldn't have done it without the most amazing team. It's the team that do it, but it was the most emotional because I got to know about being invited for this on the Friday, and it was top secret and I couldn't tell anyone, but they allowed me. They said, because you've got such a big team, we would like you to bring your sous chef and a couple of guys that work for you. And I thought, wow, fantastic. And my cooks were really upset that they hadn't heard anything. They thought, we deserve one. Why aren't they not looking at us, etc. Anyway, I didn't tell anyone. And then I telephoned work on the Sunday night. It was for the Monday. And I said, could you just change the rotas of these people? And I telephoned them. I said, tomorrow morning, we're going for a walk. And they said, what the hell is he gone off his head? And I met them at the hotel, and I immediately said, okay, we're going in a moment, but I've just got to go upstairs and see the GM. I went upstairs. I said, I just want you to know that I'm taking the boys out. We're going to collect our Michelin star. And I cried straight away. I really did. And we went off there, and the boys started to actually be very suspicious after about 100 yards. And I said, where are you taking us, chef? Come on, tell. I get filled up now when I actually talk about it, because it was bloody emotional.
Yeah.
And they said, come on, tell us. It's Michelin, isn't it? And once again, I broke down and said, yeah, come on, we're going.
Oh.
And I remember being broken up from them because I had to sit in, they had people that were watching the ceremony, and then they asked the chef to go away. And I was taken to a room, and they were announcing. And once again, we were very, very late on. And it seemed a little bit somber. Everybody was clapping politely and yeah. And then I just heard John Williams and the Ritz. The roof lifted off. I promise you, everybody was cheering, and I just was overcome. And probably the third time I cried that day, and everybody was really. It was like winning the World Cup. Absolutely. Honestly, it was like winning the World Cup. And I thought, right, okay. We had a little celebration. I went back to the hotel. I said, listen, guys, you carry on drinking. I said, I have to get back to the hotel. It was already quite late. And when I went back, I saw everybody was going crazy. The best, they called it the best Monday ever. And I seen little videos. There was no Wi-Fi and things in the kitchen at that time. And the only place that could get Wi-Fi was in the dry stores. And somebody showed me a video of this live link when we were receiving it. And there were 6 girls. They were all girls, all working in the kitchen. And they got together in the dry store because that's where they had the reception. And somebody videoed them of the live screening of this.
Right.
And they were in tears. Oh. They were hugging each other, but, really joyous.
Yeah.
And I cried again. Because I thought, this is just amazing, because what it does, it gives you the stamp of approval to say you're on the right line and that you're doing a good job. But it means so much to chefs. A lot of chefs will say, no, it means nothing. But for me, it is the most important. And I just really do believe in them in every sense, because they are quite rigid with what they do and how they do it. Mm-hmm. But there's still ambition in me. We're not finished.
Oh, that's amazing to hear. Great.
I have a team. They are a great bunch of lads, and they've all been trained by me. And they will be some of the finest chefs in London, over the next 10 years, 15 years. They will be top men. Yeah. And I'm just proud to have them with me at the moment and keep pushing it forward with the best way we can. But I really adore the fact that we have, because it's something that I was really upset that we hadn't. But we're in a great place, and it gives us the confidence to really home in on what we do. That's what it did do. And I feel that we're better for it now. We've been working, as my team says, research and development. That's what they call it now. And they've been working for about 4 weeks with just tweaking little things and making things better. And hopefully for a better experience. The whole service team, we discussed different things of how we can look after the customer better, how the hospitality can be better, and giving, this industry, I use this word a lot, hospitality is what we're about, and that's what we should be giving.
Yeah.
And so many people don't recognize that.
Yeah.
And, that's what I enjoy.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
do you feel there's been a lot more, has there been any more pressure being put on the team in the kitchen since you received the Michelin star? Because maintaining it is very stressful as well, isn't it?
Do you know, I really believe that every member of the staff will say, they have a responsibility to maintain that.
Mm-hmm.
That's without me saying anything. And they are proud that they've got that.
Mm-hmm.
And what it's done is it's actually taken shackles off them and said, we do this. And all that happens is, I think people tend to relax a little bit and move better. I really do. But they all feel a responsibility, but I don't think pressure.
Right.
I think, they are working for a goal.
Yeah.
They are trying their level best. Not that they weren't before, but I think it gives clarity. That rubber stamp gives the clarity. So you say, we know that we're doing this. How can we just make it that touch better?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I would say.
Yeah. Well, John, you've devoted your life to your career. We all know the time that chefs commit to being in the kitchen. What kind of sacrifices, if any, have you made? I mean, we know that, when you were very young, when you really missed home and then coming back into London, that was a big sacrifice. What other kind of changes have you been through that you found particularly difficult, if any?
Well, the reality, I've spent a lot of time at work.
Yes.
And, with the best will in the world, your family life you need balance. And I didn't always have that balance. I wouldn't think I just used to say to my wife, I'm going to work. That's it. I'm off. And that was the way it was. It was accepted. And not really bring the kids up. I mean, my kids are 31 and 34. And every weekend, they know I'm here. My daughter will always be, she comes around Saturday and Sunday. We walk the dog, as I said, but we always have lunch on Sunday. And my son comes around. He just lives in Radlett, so it's very close to where I live.
Right.
And, he's popping up after our little Zoom here today. But it's, I often say, sometimes I wasn't there and maybe I missed some of the things, but in the last 10 years, we're closer than ever.
Amazing.
So I haven't got a bad story, but I should have devoted a little bit more time. That's the only thing. And with balance.
What is the best advice that you want to give to young chefs of today?
Young chefs of today, I would say to them, first and foremost, really listen. Because people are saying things to you, and when you really listen, you do learn amazing things that can be imprinted on your brain. I certainly on things, everything that I know today are through things that people have told me and taught me, and they're in very different ways. So it's quite important to be able to communicate, digest that, and make it happen. Work with the very, very best people that you can. And you can learn from every single person from all walks of life. The reason that I say that, even in bad circumstances, you learn.
Absolutely.
Because what you learn is not what to do. So there is a learning experience in everything. I think, as I say, go to the very best people to work with. Really, focus on it. But it's not just about a recipe. So many people don't quite get that. They think, I've learned a recipe, I know it. I'm sorry, you don't. Because within a restaurant environment or a hotel environment, that's why every kitchen is different, because they have different needs. And the need of that kitchen will determine how you do things also. So it's not just about looking at a recipe and say, yeah, I can cook that recipe now. It's so much more to learning how to manage. It's learning how to cope with people. It's learning how to actually look after the customer. And it's beyond, for a chef, it's not about the food that you're putting on the hot plate. It's the feedback that you get at the expense of the customer that has had that food, that can tell you whether it was good, bad, or indifferent. And every customer that ever makes a comment, you better believe it. I hate it when chefs say, no, that wasn't like that. I do it like this, and it's not. It's total rubbish. It's because the customer has experienced something. So you have to listen to that to make the improvement that you want. It may be just a temperature thing. It may be just somebody doing something in the wrong way. It could be so many things, but listen to it, because that's when you will improve. So I think that for me is probably the most important, and really work hard. Don't mumble up. There's so many people saying, well, I'm working too hard, so I'm not going to do that. Work for yourself. The energy that you put into that is for you, and it's got to be for your benefit. And as long as it gets you benefit, keep at it. So many people will say, why should I give that? Well, if you don't give it, you're not going to move forward.
Yeah.
It's very simple.
Yeah. Well, speaking of listening, so earlier on you said that you really wanted to share a story. I think it was about Lady Thatcher. Do you want to tell us about that?
I think we'll start off. Lady Thatcher finished her life in the Ritz.
Yeah.
She lived there when she died. And we have to go back a lot of years. And I can't remember the exact date, but I was chef of Claridge's. And basically one afternoon, Lady Elizabeth Anson, who was the party planner at the time, and she came into the Ritz restaurant in the Royal Box in between lunch and dinner for a tasting. I was told it was a VIP and you have to go and see them. And it was Lady Thatcher. And she was sitting there with Dennis. I had just arrived back in Claridge's, so it would have been 94, approximately 94, 95, the very latest. It was her 70th birthday. And she was sitting there in the Royal Box, and I had to propose some menus to her. So I sat down and I was quite taken aback. She was still at the height of her powers, a very, very special lady. And I thought, wow, I'm going to be doing the function. And she sat me down. Not only that, the Queen was coming and all kinds of dignitaries, but the Queen was coming. So it also showed the way the Queen felt about Lady Thatcher, because it was a private occasion. And she sat me down. I sat down, and she looked at me, and I think she said, oh, this young man's, well, I wasn't so young, but I was much younger than today. She said, this young man must be quite nervous. That's what I felt. And straight away, she said, now, chef. She said, before you tell me what you're going to serve me, I just want to tell you a little bit about me. I said, oh, yes. So I sat there listening. She said, I'm very, very easygoing where food is concerned. I eat anything. She said, let me tell you a typical day. She says, in the morning, she says, I get up, I don't eat any breakfast, I just have coffee. She said, sometimes I might have a biscuit with a cup of tea at 10:30. Lunch, I eat whatever is on the table. She said, if I'm at a function, I eat whatever's on the menu, but I never make a fuss. I eat anything. Lovely. She said, in the afternoon, I might have a piece of cake and a cup of tea. She said, but dinner, if we have a function, if I've got a function to go to, I eat whatever's on the menu, But if not, I always like to have dinner with Dennis. And that's usually fairly late on at about 10 o'clock. Isn't that right, Dennis? And he said, yes, that's right, my dear. And I thought, oh, wow, this is fairly cool. And she says, and do you know what that is, chef? I said, I'm sorry, I really don't. She says, anything that I can get from Marks and Spencer's and I can pop it in that machine. And it goes, bing, it's ready. Now, chef, you're in charge. What are you going to cook for me? So I built this menu.
You didn't go off to Marks and Spencer's then?
No, but it totally relaxed me in every sense. I thought, wow, because she was looking at me, and I promise you, she was at her best. She had a way of looking at you and saying, I'm interested in you. I want to hear what you've got to say, and I'm listening. I'm waiting for you. And it sort of chilled me. Mm. And I thought, wow, what a woman.
So what did you create for her?
Well, actually, I'm going to not tell you that just yet, because we have to go forward now. But I did create a very nice menu for her. And basically, we have to move on now. And it was probably 6 months before she passed. Now, first of all, for years, Lady Thatcher used to have a table in the Ritz every fortnight where she'd have lunch. But then she came and stayed with us for the last 6 months of her life, etc. And it was very early on. I'm going to say, let's say 6 months before she passed. And this particular day, I had a table of 4 people. Do you know Peter Allis, the BBC golf commentator? He passed away just this year. Yeah. Peter was a friend of mine. I used to go to some charity events, and he used to start, and he always used to say, and here we've got Big John from the Ritz on the tee, ready to play his golf, and whoosh, off he's gone. Anyway, Peter was a good friend, and he used to have a program called Around with Alice, and he used to have a chat, just knocking the balls and interviewing people. And we came up with an idea, or Peter did, where it was a lunch with Alice. So he brought the people I bid for this charity table. There was a table of 4, and they came and had lunch. I prepared the menu. Peter gave them lots of stories because he was a great raconteur and chat, amazing. And I went to see them. So I'm standing there with Peter, and I really did adore him. He was a great man, great man. And he sat there, and he said, we've had a lovely lunch, John. And he used to speak like, it's a really, really lovely lunch, man. And I said, good. And he says, by the way, have you seen who's over there? On table, what's that table? I said, that's table 1. He said, have you seen who's on table 1? I said, yes, Peter, I've seen who's on table 1. He said, do you ever go and see her? I said, to be honest, no, not now, because she's having private business and things. I tend not to go to the table. He said, you what? I said, no. He said, you should. I said, no, Peter. I told him the story about doing her 70th birthday. He said, you're off your head. He says, if you don't go there now, I'm going to drag you over there myself. I said, no, Peter, you're not going to. And he got up. I said, no, okay, I'm going to go. And I went across. Now, you have to remember, at this particular time, she was actually, they said she was losing some of her mind, and, you know, dementia, etc., were kicking in. Although I don't know all of the medical thing, but that was the story. And I went to the table, and I said, Lady Thatcher, I said, excuse me for just popping to see you. I said, but I just wanted to come and say, good afternoon. I hope you've enjoyed your lunch today. And I know that you'll not remember me, but I cooked for your 70th birthday at Claridge's. She said, my dear boy, of course you should have come up. And do you know what? I can remember exactly what we had for dinner. We had Dover sole with some morels inside there. We had a poached breast of chicken, and we had this amazing apple and bramble parfait. How could I ever forget? Well, I just went, wow. A woman that was supposed to not remember anything. Well, I run downstairs, and there's 12 steps going from the restaurant to the kitchen. I did it in 3. I went to the kitchen, and I was floating. I said, do you imagine Lady Thatcher remembers what I cooked for her 70th birthday?
Amazing.
And that, for me, was one of the proudest moments of my life.
How wonderful. Oh my gosh. Really standout dishes. I feel like I need to come in and have these dishes now.
But that's true. It was really special. And little things like that, I don't know, they mean so much to me.
Yeah.
And I think that's what young people should strive for. You know, it's not about working, it's about giving people some memory. And when they give you that feedback of memory, that's what it does to you. Mm. I get quite emotional with things like that. And honestly, I've told this story 100 times because I'm so proud that I had the opportunity, and I was actually invited to the funeral. You know, and they're special people. Mm. Special people do make me feel something. They give me a warm glow. And that's why I say, you know, there are people that really make me emotional, but they're, you know, the pop star world or the pop culture and the Hollywood, you know, actors or anything, it doesn't really mean anything to me. But I feel certainly Lady Thatcher is somebody that I really looked up to. I think she did amazing things. And as I said, the royal family, there's nothing like it. There's nothing like it. And, you know, when you think, for me, the royal family it's the best thing. I'm not going to say it's the only thing, but we don't have a lot of things in Great Britain now. But the one thing we have is the royal family, and everybody should remember that, because what they bring to this country, I'm telling you, it would be nothing without them. That's my humble opinion.
Yeah, I'm on your page. And does the Queen have a favorite dish?
What I would say to you is, once again, conservative food. I think they know what they like, and they keep to tradition and seasonality, and quite classic.
Okay.
That's the best I would actually describe in my, you know, it's not that I've cooked for her every day. I think there's always a framework to work within on a menu. And I think, you know, be classic and straightforward is the best way. I think nobody wants surprises.
And what about you? What are your favorite dishes? Where do you, in normal times, of course, where is your favorite restaurant? Where do you like to dine? Or who's your favorite chef?
You know, in Britain, I think, you know, you've got several great restaurants. I think for me, certainly Heston. I love the Fat Duck, the Waterside Inn. I love certainly Claire Smith at Core. I had a great meal there last year. One of the few times I went out, and it was really memorable. Claude Bozzi, you know, they're proper cooking establishments, and they understand the culture in every sense. You know I'm not giving anybody new inspirational places, but they're there because they're good. That's the reality. They're very, very special places.
I think you've just listed all of my favorite restaurants, and how phenomenal is it that, you know, women are really making waves in the industry. Claire Smith, she's got 3 Michelin stars. Core is a fantastic restaurant.
What I would say, I hope people understand the achievement that Claire has done.
Mm.
I admire her from the bottom of my heart. I tell you, she has done an amazing job, and she is from strength to strength. It is fantastic for this country also.
Mm.
And I'm in awe. That's the truth. Amazing.
John, we have been together for, is that 3 hours? No, it couldn't have been 3 hours, could it? Is it?
Wow.
I still have one last question for you.
Really?
Tell me something about yourself that I couldn't possibly know.
Oh, I'm an open book.
I know that.
I'm trying to think. Okay, I don't know if you know this, so I'm going to say it. Well, I'm single, but hoping not to keep that status very long. I'm with a friend at the moment, but
How lovely. That's really lovely
yeah.
to hear.
My daughter is my biggest critic.
Yeah, they always are. Yeah.
My daughter, when I will measure food. My daughter, when she eats, when she says this is good, it's special. And she's not a person that's saying it for any reason. She'll be eating, and we were having a chat yesterday, and we had some new season lamb. And she said, "Wow, Dad, this lamb is really beautiful." I said, "Well, it's new season lamb, and it's this, and I got it from James Martin. In actual fact, I just did a show for him, and he gave me a china end. He says, 'Yeah, take that home,' and it was absolutely first class. But what I was impressed with, how she was able to pick up without me saying anything.
Mm.
She said, 'Yeah, but this is very, very special.' Nobody knows that I've lost 5 inches. Well, it's 6 inches off my waist.
Well, congratulations. That is really, really good. It's great.
Nobody knows that. I haven't told anybody that. And I've got to get new chef's uniform, etc. What else is there? Some secret. Well, I'm going to tell you something. It mightn't be totally true. I'm not really a Geordie.
You're not really a Geordie. Okay.
Yeah. No, Geordies don't. Real Geordies come from Newcastle, and I'm what they call a sand dancer. But people will know that. I just thought I'd throw that in. It was something that might make people laugh.
No, that's great. That's a great one. John, thank you so much for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you. We've had 3 hours together. It's been literally like lunch and dinner. So thank you so much for your time. It's been such a pleasure. Guys, if you enjoyed today's interview, please subscribe, rate, and drop me a quick review. It's super helpful so other people can find me. And if you want to keep up to date with what John is up to, you can find him on Instagram at John William Chef, and I'm at Posh Nosh Gal.
Shalina,
Done.
all I can say is it has been pure joy. And if it's lunch and dinner, there's nobody better to have an interview with. Thank you very, very much indeed. I've really thoroughly enjoyed it. I think you know that.
Ditto. So did I. It's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much, John.